Listen very carefully. What I am about to tell you over the next 20 minutes might make you feel deeply uncomfortable. It might make you feel a sense of urgency that borders on panic or perhaps even a little bit of anger at the way the world works. But I can promise you this, it will be the most significant information you absorb this entire year. We are going to start with a brutal game of what if. Imagine the date is March 9th, 2009. The global financial system isn't just down, it is in a state of absolute terrifying cardiac arrest. Trillions of dollars in retirement savings have been vaporized. The headlines are screaming about a second Great Depression. People are jumping out of windows in New York. Families in the suburbs are packing their lives into minivans as the bank forecloses on their dreams. On that specific day, the S&P 500, the pulse of the American economy, hit a hellish bottom of 676 points. Now, if you had $50,000 in your hand at that exact moment, what would you have done? Be honest. 99% of people chose fear. They retreated. They sold their remaining stocks at a 50% loss just to save what was left. They hid their cash under mattresses. They were paralyzed by the now. But there was a woman named Margaret. Margaret wasn't a hedge fund manager. She wasn't a math genius from MIT. She was an ordinary, quiet elementary school teacher who had spent 20 years saving for a house down payment. On that day, while the world was screaming the end is near, Margaret did something that seemed clinical, even psychotic to her friends. She walked into her brokerage and put every single cent of that $50,000 into a simple S&P 500 index fund. Her family told her she was throwing her life away. Her friends begged her to wait for certainty. Margaret ignored the noise. Today, that $50,000 investment with dividends reinvested is worth nearly $600,000. Margaret didn't have a secret algorithm. She didn't have insider information from the Federal Reserve. She simply recognized a rare tectonic moment in history where massive fear creates a vacuum that only massive wealth can fill. Now, here is the question that keeps you up at night. Do you feel like you missed that boat? Do you look at today's world with skyrocketing rents, $7 lattes, and home prices that look like phone numbers and feel like the door to true wealth has been slammed in your face? Do you feel like you are working twice as hard just to stay in the same place? What if I told you that a moment 10 times larger than 2009, a convergence of economic, demographic, and technological forces so powerful they will rewrite the entire global hierarchy, is hitting us right now? We are standing on the edge of the great wealth transfer. Over the next 2 decades, $124 trillion is going to change hands. It is the greatest redistribution of capital in the history of the human race. It is 5 times the size of the total U.S. national debt. It is 25 times the size of every COVID-19 stimulus check ever printed. This transfer is going to decide who becomes the next generation of millionaires and who gets crushed by the wheels of a changing economy. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly where this money is moving, why the mainstream media is distracting you with useless culture wars, while the elite are positioning themselves for this reset. And most importantly, I will give you a wealth capture toolkit to profit from this tsunami, even if you don't have a single cent of inheritance coming from your own family. To grasp the opportunity, we have to grasp the math, and the math of $124 trillion is frankly difficult for the human brain to process. We think in hundreds, thousands, maybe millions, but a trillion? If you spent $1 million every single day, it would take you 340,000 years to burn through $124 trillion. This is an ocean of capital. Where did it come from? It didn't appear out of thin air. This is the accumulated life's work of the most successful, most protected, and most fortunate generation in the history of civilization, the baby boomers. They were born into a post-World War II world where the U.S. dollar was king, where industrial expansion was limitless, and where you could buy a 3-bedroom house on a single high school graduate salary. They lived through a 40-year period of declining interest rates that acted like rocket fuel for asset prices. They bought homes for $30,000 that are now worth $1.2 million. They bought stocks in the 80s that have split and grown 5,000%. Currently, the oldest boomers are hitting their 80s. The youngest have passed 60. The great wealth dam of the 20th century is beginning to breach. According to Cerulli Associates, this isn't a theory. It is an inevitability. Between now and 2045, that $124 trillion will cascade downward. But here is the hook that most people miss: the capital wake. Think of a giant aircraft carrier moving through a narrow canal. Even if you aren't on the ship, the sheer displacement of water, the wake, is so violent that it changes the shoreline for miles. When $124 trillion moves from a holding state to a spending, reinvesting state, it creates a massive displacement. This money won't sit in old-fashioned savings accounts. It is going to be liquidated. It is going to be used to pay for taxes, to buy different types of real estate, to fund new tech startups, and to fuel a massive explosion in the service economy. You do not need to be an heir to capture the wake. You just need to know where the water is going to hit. Why isn't everyone talking about this on the nightly news? Because history has a very cruel way of repeating itself. During every major wealth reset, the logic of the crowd is always focused on the wrong things. Let's go back to Margaret in 2009. The crowds were focused on the now. They were obsessed with the fear of the day. Today, the crowds are focused on inflation, political polarization, and high interest rates. They are watching the ripples on the surface of the water while ignoring the massive tectonic plate shifting miles beneath them. Look at the data from the Global Wealth Report after the 2009 crash. From 2010 to 2024, the number of millionaires in the U.S. nearly tripled. We went from 8 million to nearly 24 million millionaire households. That is 15 million new millionaires created in a decade and a half. These aren't all tech geniuses or lottery winners. These are people who understood that when the old world sells out of fear, the new world buys for the future. The Great Wealth Transfer is going to do this on a scale we cannot even imagine. But there is a massive catch. The money isn't going to flow back into the same places the boomers kept it. The boomers loved the suburban dream, the white picket fence, the traditional 60/40 stock and bond portfolio, and the blue chip manufacturing companies. Their heirs, the millennials and Gen X, have radically different values. They are digital natives. They are environmentally conscious. They value experiences over possessions. They are moving money into artificial intelligence, decentralized finance, urban tech hubs, and green energy. If you are still trying to play the game with a 1985 rulebook, you are going to find yourself standing in an empty stadium. The $124 trillion is moving, but it is moving into a different dimension of the economy. If you aren't positioned there, the waterfall will miss you entirely. To profit from this, you need to understand the information density of what I call asset dislocation. When a wealth transfer happens, it isn't a clean, organized handoff. It is messy. It is a period of forced liquidation. Imagine a family business that has been run by the same man for 50 years. He passes away. His 3 children, who live in different states and have different careers, don't want to run a manufacturing plant. What do? They sell. They sell fast. They sell to private equity or they sell to a competitor. Suddenly that asset is dislocated. Now multiply that by millions of households. We're about to see a massive spike in market liquidity. Houses that haven't been on the market since 1972 are going to be listed in the next 5 years. Stock portfolios that have been buy and hold for 4 decades are going to be liquidated to pay for inheritance taxes or to be split among heirs. This creates friction. And in economics, where there is friction, there is money to be made. This dislocation creates a desperate demand for specialized services. Who is going to manage these complex estates? Who is going to renovate these time capsule houses to make them millennial ready? Who is going to provide the investment advice for a 3-5-year-old who suddenly has $2 million but zero financial education? This is the receiver market strategy. You don't need an inheritance to be the person who services the transfer. If you can position your career or your business to be the oil that reduces the friction of this $124 trillion move, you will effectively inherit a piece of that wealth through the free market. You are catching the overflow. Here is a fact that almost nobody discusses, even in the elite financial circles. Everyone talks about money going from parents to children, but that is the second step. The first step is the spousal transfer, and it accounts for $54 trillion of the total. Historically, women outlive men by an average of 5 to 7 years. In the baby boomer generation, the men were often the primary controllers of the family's financial decisions. As these men pass away, control of $54 trillion is shifting into the hands of surviving spouses, mostly women in their 70s and 80s. This is a massive silent shift in market psychology. Why? Because research from firms like Merrill Lynch and UBS shows that women invest and spend money fundamentally differently than men. They tend to be more risk averse. They are more focused on legacy and long-term sustainability. They are much more likely to hire professional advisors than to try and beat the market themselves. We are about to see entire industries, from luxury travel to healthcare to asset management, completely pivot because the decision maker has changed. If you are an entrepreneur or an investor and you aren't thinking about the female-led wealth economy, you are literally ignoring half of the money in the world. These women will need new types of community living arrangements, different styles of financial planning, and a higher level of high-touch service. This is a knowledge point that can make you a fortune if you are the one providing that value. Let's look at the map of money. The great wealth transfer isn't just moving between bank accounts. It is moving across the physical map of the world. The baby boomers are concentrated in dispersing markets, the traditional suburbs of the Rust Belt, the sleepy retirement communities of mid-Florida, and the expensive but aging zip codes of the Northeast. Their heirs, however, are concentrated in receiver markets. These are the tech-heavy, culturally vibrant hubs like Austin, Nashville, Charlotte, Phoenix, and the high-tech corridors of the Mountain West. Think about the implications for real estate. In the next 10 years, we are going to see a real estate divergence. We will see an oversupply of 4,000 square foot boomer mansions in suburbs that young people find boring and isolated. Prices in those areas may stagnate or even fall. Meanwhile, in receiver cities, we will see a relentless explosion in prices. Why? Because you have thousands of millennials who finally have the down payment they've been waiting for, money that was unlocked by the transfer. If you are looking to invest in property or start a local business, you must follow the migration. A mediocre apartment in a receiver city will outperform a luxury villa in a dispersing city every single time, because that is where the capital is flowing. You want to be at the destination before the luggage arrives. This geographic awareness is one of the most powerful tools in your wealth capture toolkit. We cannot talk about this reset without talking about the technology multiplier. We are living through the dawn of the artificial intelligence era. It is the most significant leap in productivity since the steam engine. Now, Combine that with the $124 trillion transfer, boomers as a demographic have been slow to adopt AI. Their wealth is tied up in traditional capital, but the heirs, the millennials and Gen Z, they are digital natives. They don't just use technology, they live in it. When this generation receives their inheritance, they aren't going to put it into old school retail brands or dying oil companies. They are going to pour it into the intelligence economy. This creates what I call a double surge. First, you have the surge of capital from the wealth transfer. Second, you have the surge of productivity from AI. When these two forces meet, they create a hyper growth phase for tech infrastructure. Think about the millennial who inherits a family-owned construction company. They don't want to run it the old way with paper ledgers and manual scheduling. They are going to invest inherited capital into AI-driven logistics, robotic automation, and green materials. They are going to spend massive amounts of money to modernize. If you are positioned in the tech sector, or if you are an investor in the picks and shovels of AI, like semiconductors, data centers, and software as a service, you are looking at a compounding effect that could turn a small investment today into a life-changing fortune by 2035. The wealth transfer is the fuel and AI is the engine. I know what many of you are thinking, Rob, this is great if your last name is Rockefeller or if your parents have a massive estate, but my parents are just ordinary people. I have zero inheritance coming. Does this even apply to me? The answer is absolutely yes. In fact, being the hungry outsider during a wealth transfer can be a massive advantage. Inheritance often makes people soft. It makes them complacent. But the great wealth transfer creates a secondary economy that rewards the aggressive. If you don't have an inheritance, you must become a wealth conduit. A conduit is someone who facilitates the movement of money. Think about the gold rush in California. The people who got the richest weren't necessarily the ones digging for gold. They were the people selling the shovels, the jeans, and the tents. They were the ones who provided the services the miners couldn't live without. In this scenario, the miners are the heirs with $124 trillion in their pockets. What do they need? 1. Luxury and lifestyle services. When someone inherits $5 million, the first thing they do is spend. They want the renovated house, the luxury travel, the high-end cars. If you start a business that caters to this new money lifestyle with a modern, tech-forward brand, you are effectively inheriting their wealth through your profit margins. 2. Modern wealth management. The old guard financial advisors are boring and outdated. If you can speak the language of the younger generation, if you understand crypto, AI, stocks, and social impact investing, you can capture the management fees of that $124 trillion. 3. Specialized skilled labor. We are facing a massive shortage of skilled trades. As millions of boomer homes hit the market, they will need millennial renovations. If you own a high-end contracting or interior design firm that specializes in tech-integrated homes, you will have more work than you can handle for the next 20 years. Being a conduit means positioning yourself in the path of the flow. You aren't waiting for a handout. You are building a wealth dam that catches the runoff. We need to address the mindset required to survive this reset. The biggest obstacle to your success isn't the economy, it is the noise. We live in an attention economy that profits from your fear. The mainstream media wants you to be obsessed with the latest crisis of the week. They want you to stay in a state of high cortisol where you are too stressed to think long term. Why? Because people in fear are easy to control and easy to sell to. If you had listened to the media in 2009, you would have sold everything and missed the greatest bull market in history. If you listen to them now, you will stay on the sidelines while the $124 trillion transfer happens right in front of you. You have to develop what I call economic stoicism. You have to ignore the ripples and watch the tides. The great wealth transfer is a 2-5 year process. It doesn't matter what the Fed does this Tuesday. It doesn't matter who wins the election next month in the long run. The demographic reality, the fact that 75 million boomers are aging and their wealth must move, is an immovable fact. To win, you have to disconnect from the crabs in a bucket mentality. Most of your friends and family will tell you that the system is rigged and that you'll never get ahead. That is their defense mechanism to justify their own inaction. You must be like Margaret. You must have the cold eyes to see value when everyone else sees chaos. I promised you a wealth capture toolkit, and I'm going to give you a concrete 5-step framework that you can start implementing today. Step 1, build the tax shield. The government is the single biggest wealth drainer in history. Whether you are making money through a job or inheriting it, you must protect your seed corn in the U.S. This means maximizing your 401ks, Roth IRAs, and HSAs. These aren't just savings accounts, they are legal tax havens. For 2026, the contribution limits are at record highs. Use them. Every dollar you keep from the tax man is a dollar that compounds for your future. If you aren't in the U.S., find the equivalent tax-advantaged vehicles in your country. Do not let the government take 30% of your growth before you even start. Step 2, maintain broad market exposure. Stop trying to find the next NVIDIA or the next Bitcoin with 100% of your money. That is gambling, not investing. Own the entire broad market basket through low-cost index funds. When $124 trillion flows into the economy, the aggregate value of all companies goes up. By owning the whole market, you are guaranteed to participate in the great liftoff. It is the most reliable, boring, and powerful way to build a fortune. Step 3, geographic positioning. If you are young and flexible, move to a receiver city. If you can't move, invest there. Look for real estate in areas where the in-migration of young high earners is highest. These are the locations where inherited wealth will be spent on coffee, rent, and services. A C-class property in a growth market is better than an A-class property in a dying market. Step 4, develop transition skills. Pivot your career or your side hustle toward wealth movement services. Learn about estate law, modern marketing for luxury brands, tech integration, or financial planning. These are the winning sectors. Be the person who handles the money, and the money will eventually stick to you. Step 5, the war chest strategy. Even during a massive wealth transfer, markets will crash. We will have black swan events. You must have a cash reserve. Most people use their cash to buy stuff. You should use your cash to buy opportunity. When the market dips 20% because of a temporary panic, that is when you deploy your war chest into the path of the $124 trillion waterfall. You buy the fear of the old world to build the wealth of the new world. We are standing at a crossroads that only appears once every 4 or 5 generations. The $124 trillion great wealth transfer is not a maybe. It is a mathematical certainty. It is a slow motion explosion that has already been triggered. You can look at this information and feel overwhelmed. You can say the system is rigged or I don't have enough money to start. But remember, Margaret, she didn't have $1 million. She didn't have a PhD in finance. She had a modest house deposit and the sheer, unadulterated courage to act when everyone else was paralyzed by the headlines. History will record this period as the moment when the wealth of the 20th century was redistributed. It will record a new class of self-made millionaires who didn't necessarily earn it through a traditional paycheck, but who captured it by being in the right place with the right skills at the right time. You now have the knowledge, you know the scale, you know the timeline, you know the strategies. The only thing left to decide is who you are going to be in this story. Will you be the one who looks back 10 years from now and says, I knew it was happening, but I was too busy watching the news? Or will you be the one who stood in the path of the money and changed your family's financial destiny forever? The tide is out. The water's about to rush back in. It's time to stop picking up shells and start building your ship. If you found this deep dive valuable, do me a favor, share this with one person who is currently stressed about their financial future. The more we understand these invisible forces, the more we can build a generation that thrives instead of just survives. Remember, your income is a choice. My name is Rob, and I'll see you in the next one.